right, let's get it started here on a Tuesday night Panther-Lair Show. Panther-Lair.com/YouTube.com. No, what? That's not the right website. Jeez, we're already off to a terrible start. Well, at least the audio is working this week at the beginning of the podcast. Last week we went 5 minutes, couldn't get the microphone to work, had to turn it off and turn it back on or unplug it and replug it back in. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the website. Or it's the place you can watch the live stream every Tuesday night at 8:30. You can check out the podcast, of course, throughout the week. You can subscribe to the Panther-Lair Show on Podbean or Libsyn. I think you can find it on Stitcher. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on iTunes. And, of course, you can find it at Panther-Lair.com. And that is the website that I did want to mention, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. And, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. I say that all the time, and it just sort of rolls off my tongue. It's like some sort of tagline. You might think I'm reading a script. I'm actually not reading a script. I mean, if you can look at the... there's nothing here on this. There's a lot of junk on this desk, but you're not, there's no script or anything that I'm reading from. I think it's the honest to God truth about our message boards. I think you do have hundreds and even thousands of Pitt fans who are there all day, every day, talking about Pitt sports, talking about Pitt football, talking about Pitt basketball, talking about Pitt recruiting, all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards get a bad rap. People like to rip on message boards. People talk down on message boards. They're often referred to as the lowest common denominator, and there is some amount of truth in that. But there's also a lot of truth in the fact that, diehard Pitt fans, real, Pitt fanatics who love Pitt and want to talk about Pitt all the time, they look for places to talk about Pitt. And, for my money, and hopefully for yours as well, there's nowhere better to talk about Pitt than on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Of course, every week we get together here for an hour on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com and talk a little Pitt sports. And I know you might be listening to this podcast later in the week, and you say, well, this isn't Tuesday night. It's Thursday morning at 7:30 or Friday afternoon at 3:30 or whatever it is that you may be listening to the podcast. I think you're missing out if you don't join in on Tuesday nights at 8:30 because we get a chance to kind of have some back and forth, which, we don't get a lot of opportunities for. We have, of course, the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday mornings. Every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., we have the Panthers Insider Show, and it's an hour of all Pitt sports talk on 93.7 The Fan, which is great. I like being on the radio, and, I think it's fun for people to turn on the radio and hear that conversation. But due to just sort of logistics and things, we don't have an opportunity to have a back and forth. We don't have an opportunity to have a conversation. At this point, there was a time when that show first started a year or two ago when we could take calls and we could go back and forth. We could talk about Pitt sports, actually talk to each other about it. We don't have that opportunity to do that right now, but we can kind of do it here on the Panther-Lair Show on Tuesday nights on our YouTube live stream, because you can jump into the chat screen and you can post your comments and post your questions and get in on the conversation, and you post your comments and questions, and we can react to it, and we can talk about it, and we can have, conversation. And that's kind of the fun thing, I think, is to get a little back and forth talking about Pitt sports. I've got plenty of things I want to talk about, but you've probably got things you want to talk about as well. So let's hash them all out. Before we jump into the conversation, of course, I have to mention HomefieldApparel.com. I've got the home field shirt on tonight. Usually have the yellow one, or I often wear the yellow one. This is the Pittsburgh Panthers. You can see sort of a retro look, classic look. I love the logo, love the graphic, the design, and I love the quality of the shirt. I mean, it's just a high quality t-shirt. It's so soft. I've had it on all day, and it's just been so comfortable. I got a great sweatshirt from Home Field, a couple shirts, and they're all just really high quality, in addition to the great graphic. You know what I mean? The great logo, and this is the kind of stuff you're going to find at Home Field. So you go check out their Pitt collection, go check out their Hawaii collection, go check out their Indiana collection or the Yukon collection. You're going to find things that you like there. I can guarantee it. So HomefieldApparel.com. You want to go check them out. We've actually had a few promos from them in the last few weeks, and hopefully you got a chance to take advantage of those. And if you didn't, go pay full price because it's worth it. HomefieldApparel.com. Just some sweet Pitt gear. And look, spring game's coming up in less than a month. Still on the schedule for April 17th at Heinz Field. They think fans are going to be in attendance. Let's all hope it's a beautiful day and you can wear your home field shirt. Order it now. We're right at the end of March. You got a couple weeks before the spring game's coming up. Order it now. You'll have it in time to wear it to the spring game, right? Come on. Homefieldapparel.com. So go check that out. Plenty of things, I think, to discuss this week. Not as much in terms of news, as far as things that have happened over the last week. There are a couple things here and there that we'll talk about news-wise. But just sort of some general topics we've been thinking about. And kind of my, one sort of theme that's been in my mind, at least for today, really for the last few days, has been roster construction. And I think, on the basketball front and the football front, I think it's interesting to think about roster construction and how the rosters have been put together and how they currently exist and sort of what the rosters look like at this point in time, which right now it's March 30th. And, the roster construction for the football team is in a different stage than it is for the basketball team. It needs to be in a different stage for the football team than the basketball team, obviously, due to sort of the different calendars that those sports operate on. Football team needs to have a roster assembled that they can hold spring camp, which they started doing again today after going on pause last week. Basketball team still very much a work in progress. And before I even jump into sort of, and I want to get into the comments and questions to see, we got some super chatters already jumping in. We thank them for that support of the podcast, and we'll get to you guys in just a second. Before I get into those those comments and questions, before I get into what these rosters look like right now for the Pitt football team and the Pitt basketball team, I'll say this about basketball, all right? And I know you're anxious. And I feel like we've probably said some version of this a few times over the last few weeks. I know you're anxious. I know you're on edge. I know you're concerned about what this Pitt basketball roster is going to look like in the fall. I know you want it to happen. You want this roster to come together. They've got how many open scholarship spots? 5 open scholarship spots, 6 open scholarship spots, 7 open scholarship spots, whatever they've got. And you want them to be filled. Because every day that passes, when they're not filled, you feel like they're never going to be filled. Or that when they ultimately do get filled, they're going to get filled by subpar players. And I understand that. I really do. But you just got to have some patience. And this isn't, got to have some patience in the sense of wait for, through 3 more losing seasons and have patience until year 7, because that's when things are really going to come together. It's just have patience for a couple months and see what this roster looks like on May 1st. Today's March 30th. See what the roster looks like on April 30th. See what the roster looks like on May 30th. See what the roster looks like on June 30th. Because it's going to look different than it does right now. For better or for worse. There are going to be additions to this roster. The jury is still out, or I shouldn't even say the jury is still out. We'll see what happens with Justin Champagnie. That's up in the air. They announced dates for the NBA draft and the NBA draft combine. We won't know until, mid-June, late June, maybe early July. I forget exactly what those dates are, but it's going to be a while before Justin Champagnie has to make a final decision on what he's going to do with going to the NBA this year or coming back to Pitt for another season. So, you could have some, a negative development with the roster, but it's in terms of players that are going to be added, there's a whole lot of time out there. And this isn't whistling in the wind, whistling past the graveyard or something like whatever cliche when you want to use. This is just the reality of the fact that there are 1,000 players in the transfer portal. And by God, I'm not even dealing in hyperbole there. There are 1,000 players in the transfer portal right now. And there's still some high school players out there to be found as well. And Jeff Capel's shown that with offering a couple in the last few weeks, including one this week. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But there are a lot of guys out there to be added that can be added to this roster. What Jeff Capel and his staff have to do is find a couple of those quality players. Now, I think, and when we talk about sort of roster construction, we get into the kind of the foundation on this roster right now. I think it's only 1 or 2 key pieces that really need to happen for this season in particular. And let's be honest, at this point, I feel like it's hard to think too many seasons in advance. If every offseason is going to be like this, where you have 1,000 guys going into the transfer portal, I'm not really worried about what the 2022-23 season is going to look like. I want to see what kind of roster they're going to build for 21-22 season. That's what's relevant to me right now, because chances are a year from now, there are going to be another 1,000 guys in the transfer portal, and Pitt's going to have another 5 open scholarship spots, and they're going to be looking to fill them again. And so you're going to kind of dance this dance every time. And the thought of, well, you need more than just 1 year Band-Aid. You need more than just patching it up. No, I don't think you need to think that far down the road. Not right now, at least. Not when you're in this position that Pitt's in right now. Because the position that Pitt's in right now, where they've got a couple guys who showed up as freshmen and looked impressive, what they really need to do is fill out the roster for this coming season. And then worry about how they're going to build it for 4 years from now, a year, next year. I mean, and that's the reality of it. But for now, I think you just have to preach patience. And if you get to a point where it's July 1st and they still have 6 empty scholarship spots on the roster, then we can start being a little impatient. Then we can start being a little anxious. But for now, if you're going to give yourself anxiety every time you go to bed or every time you wake up in the morning and Pitt doesn't have any new players added to the roster, I mean, go get some CBD or something, man. You got to relax a little bit, because I don't want to say there's no rush, but there's time, and there are a lot of available players out there. Transfer portal isn't drying up anytime soon. And as the NCAA tournament ends, we still have another week of it, more players are going to go in there. You might be at like 1,200 players or something like that. Well, probably not 1,200, but I mean, you could be approaching 1,100 players in the portal. It's crazy. It's unprecedented. I don't know what it means for the future of college basketball. I know there's a lot of hyperventilating over what it means for the future of college basketball. I don't know what it means for the future of college basketball. What I know what it means for right now is that a school like Pitt or 80 other schools in the country that had 5 players going to the transfer portal, they're going to have time. And they have time to try and fill those spots. So just a little bit of patience could probably save you some consternation and aggravation and ultimately stress. And stress is a killer, man. So, as we talk about roster construction, there's plenty of time for that work to be done. All right, let's jump into the conversation. A lot of people chiming in here, and right off the bat, Michael B, one of our regulars, always jumping in as a super chatter, and really appreciate that. Anybody who wants to be a super chatter, you want to make sure your comments and questions get read. Comments get read and reacted to, questions get read and get answered. You can jump in as a super chatter as well. Support the podcast. Very much appreciate it. Michael B says, hi, Chris. First, do you agree that the Abdul Kareem Coulibaly transfer is not a good look at all and adds to a troubling narrative about the program? That was surprising. Also, do you think we land west tomorrow? We need some good news finally. All right. So yeah, Abdul Kareem Coulibaly going into the transfer portal. I guess that happened in the last week since our last podcast. Did we not talk about that last Tuesday night? I forgot what day he went in. I guess it was probably Wednesday. I was surprised. I didn't see that coming. I did not think, a guy who was a starting center, averaged 20-some minutes per game, started 20 out of 22 games this season. I didn't think he was going to be going into the transfer portal. He was a guy who seems to have a starting job and a primary role, a prominent role locked up, a significant role in the ACC locked up for next season. I did not see him going into the transfer portal. I was surprised by it. Do I agree that it's not a good look and it adds to a troubling narrative about the program? 2 questions there. One, okay, is it not a good look? Yeah. It's a bad look because you stack that on top of Gerald Drumgoole and Audice Toney and Xavier Johnson and even Terrell Brown if you want to include him. Although I feel like if you include Terrell Brown in this conversation about transfers and guys who have gone into the transfer portal for Pitt, I feel like you're just piling on. You want to make the numbers sound more ominous, and so you include him. He was never going to be back next season. Jeff Capel said that. I would have to imagine that there were people at Pitt who were surprised that Terrell Brown even wanted to play another season of college basketball. I think they probably believed he was done and he was going to hang it up. I could be wrong about that. That's just sort of my own assumption. But, I mean, did Terrell Brown look to you like a guy who wanted to play another season of college basketball? So, I'm not sure if you would include him, but, the narrative, the good look, the bad look is having Johnson and then Tony and then Drumgoole and then now Coulibaly decide to transfer. But the thing is, I think it's not a bad look when you say, oh, all these guys are transferring. But then you go sort of one by one, and I don't know if you necessarily pick up on the narrative that that things are falling apart. Like you look at each individual situation and say, well, Johnson went for his own reason, Tony went for his own reason, Drumgoole went for his own reason, and Coulibaly went for his own reason. And I don't think there was a whole lot of overlap among their reasons, at least as it regards to being an issue with Jeff Capel. I think Johnson and Tony went for their, for sort of specific and individual reasons. I think Drumgoole went because he wasn't playing. Coulibaly apparently wanted an opportunity to play as a power forward. Vaya con Dios. And this is the other thing, when you look at 1,000 guys being in the transfer portal, and you look at guys with prominent roles in prominent conferences, the starting center at Georgetown decides to transfer. You are the starting center at Georgetown playing for Patrick Ewing, and you're transferring? I mean, how can we draw any conclusions about anybody, any program? How can we look at any situation where a guy is transferring and say, boy, that reflects poorly on the program, when you've got situations like this, when you've got guys all over the place leaving prominent roles in major conferences? I mean, kids from Carolina going, kids from Syracuse going, kids from Virginia going. No, I don't think Abdul Kareem Coulibaly transferring out of Pitt because he wants to play power forward leads to a troubling narrative about the state of the program. The whole world has gone crazy right now. Do you understand that? The whole world is upside down with the transfer portal right now. And this, again, I'm not, Chicken Little on college basketball is being ruined by this free agency. I mean, we'll see what it looks like a year from now. We'll see what it looks like 2 years from now. I don't know. Maybe this is the way of the world and there's going to be 900 kids in the transfer portal every year. But there are a lot of these things that don't make any sense to me at all. And I'm not looking at it and saying, boy, Syracuse's program, they got some real issues there. Carolina, they got some real issues. Or Georgetown, they got some real issues. Or Virginia, they got some real issues. I'm not looking at it and saying that because I'm not drawing those conclusions, because freaking everybody is transferring. I mean, that's really how it feels right now. And so is it a bad look for Pitt? It does sort of feel like they're piling up, because it's 4 guys, 5 guys now. But when there's 80 teams in the country that have had at least 5 guys enter the transfer portal, and we only get Pitt to 5 when we include Terrell Brown, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to go over the edge about that. I'm not going to jump off the bridge. Let's see here. Couple questions about Efton Reed, 5-star center in the 2021 recruiting class. S. Max says, Efton Reed looking better and better, fingers crossed. Brock Madonic says, I assume you're aware of Rivals analyst Jamie Shaw putting in 2 crystal balls for Pitt this evening for Efton Reed and Nate Santos. Are you confident they could land at Pitt? 2 different guys there. Efton Reed, like I say, a big-time center prospect who could come in and make a big impact at Pitt. I don't know if Pitt's going to get him. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. I think there's a pretty good chance that if he goes to college, he will end up at Pitt. But I don't know even how certain it is that he'll go to college. I think he's a guy who could go, G League or whatever you want to call it. I shouldn't say whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's what it's called, right? If he decides to go to college, yeah, I think Pitt's got a pretty good shot. I don't know if I would go so far as to call them a lock or anything like that, but it feels to me like there's a lot of things I'm uncertain about. You know what I mean? There are a lot of questions about Efton Reed and what's going to happen in his future, and I don't know the answers to too many of those. Then the other one Brock asks about is Nate Santos. He's a 6'7" wing playing in Connecticut. I just got an offer from Pitt on Monday, And yeah, I really like Pitt's chances there. He's pretty much focused on Pitt and George Washington, and I think Pitt's going to get him. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens somewhat soon, unless all of a sudden teams jump on him and start his recruitment takes off, and he wants to take a little bit more time. I think Pitt's got a really good chance of landing him. He's a big wing who can play outside. He's got pretty decent. He's a pretty decent shooter, and I think he's got a lot of skills and could fill a role on this team, both this coming season and in the future. So yeah, I like their chances there. I don't know. I don't know about Reed though. We'll have to see what happens there. Let's scroll down here. Brock Madonic has a football question. Says, where do you see MJ Devonshire fitting on this team? Do you see him as a starting safety or cornerback? I don't know. I don't know if he'll be a starter. I think he'll be in the rotation. I think they're giving him work at safety and corner. I could see. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays safety, and then it becomes a question of whether or not he can win a starting job. I think they're bringing back obviously Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett, but Hallett is out this spring, and so with an injury, so there's going to be opportunities for somebody like Devonshire or some of the other younger safeties to get out there and show what they can do. I think he's going to be in the mix. I think we've seen that this coaching staff, this Pat Narduzzi and his group, they like to rotate, the defensive backs, particularly the corners. They like to rotate a lot, and I think when they've had comparable talent among their safeties, they've rotated. But when they had Paris Ford and DeMar Hamlin, they weren't trying to rotate too often with those guys. They wanted to keep both of those guys on the field as much as they could. This year, they don't necessarily have Hamlin and Ford. They've got Hallett and Hill, who I think can both be pretty good, but not so far above a guy like Devonshire that I would not put him in the mix. I think you could see more of a rotation at safety this year than maybe we've seen the last few seasons. And then I think there'll be a rotation at corner with Marquez Williams and Damari Mathis and A.J. Woods and Rashad Battle, and then some of the younger players, even maybe a Javante Royal, bringing in freshman Khalil Anderson. I think Khalil Anderson is going to get on the field. I think there's going to be a real rotation at corner. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at safety. But if that corner depth develops nicely, I think they could look at Devonshire more as a safety. I think that would be a good option for him. I think he could hang back there, and he's got good speed. So he can give you that sort of good last line of defense. Scott Eisenberg says, non-pick question: is this Gonzaga team the best college basketball team you've ever seen? Ever in my life? Jeez, man, I would have to really think about that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure if I would go that far. They're the best team this year. I don't think there's any question about that. Although I have Houston in an auction March Madness league, so I'm pulling for Houston to go all the way. But Gonzaga is certainly the best team this year. I don't know. I mean, I remember back to there have been some Carolina teams, there have been some Duke teams, there have been some UConn teams where I said, "Holy smokes, that team was loaded." I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I could say that they're the best college basketball team I've ever seen. I'd have to think pretty long and hard about that before I'd go that far. TRR asks football question: will the 2021 offense have more firepower? Jordan Addison has it. Who else? Need Israel Abanikanda and another receiver to step up. Maybe Rodney Hammond has some speed for some more sizzle. And this actually kind of can dovetail with Brock Madonic's next question. What are your thoughts on Melquise Stovall coming to Pitt? And it kind of that works together nicely when we talk about offensive weapons and firepower. I do think this offense should have the weapons to make plays. I think this offense has the talent and the skill players to make plays and make explosive plays and make things happen out there. I think Jordan Addison is legit. We've seen that, right? I think Vincent Davis has shown what he can do. If the blocking holds up, I think he's good enough to be a number one running back, but I'd like to have somebody else working with him in that role. Ideally it would be Israel Abanikanda stepping up, or Daniel Carter stepping into a role as kind of a thunder and lightning counterpoint or complement, I should say, with Vincent Davis. I tell you, at receiver, the guy I'm bullish on, and I've been bullish on since last season, is Jalen Barden. I think Jalen Barden can make plays. I think Jalen Barden, when he got an opportunity last year, I think it was the Virginia Tech game, when a bunch of guys were out, when Jordan Addison was out, I mean, he shined. And I think he's going to shine this year. Now, he's not a bigger receiver. That's one of the things they're kind of missing on this on this offense is a bigger receiver. I mean, Jared Wayne is probably the biggest guy they've got. And he, well, at least of the returning players, I think, what's his name? Jalen Bradley coming in as a freshman has some, or Jaden Bradley, I should say, has some serious size. And he's going to add that to the, receiving core this season, and I mean, we'll see if he gets on the field and what he does. But I mean, I think Jared Wayne is probably their biggest contributing receiver this season, and so you've got a lot of smaller guys with Addison, Barden, Stovall coming in, who's coming in as a transfer from Hawaii. Who's a speed guy. He reminds some people of DJ Turner. I think probably because last year Turner was a smaller, fast transfer wide receiver who came in, and now Stovall is a smaller, fast transfer wide receiver coming in. But I really think a guy like Barden is set for a breakout season. I think Taysier Mack can be pretty good. Pat Narduzzi really praised him here on Tuesday when he met with the media, said that Mack has had a really good spring thus far. And, I think the players are there, and I think the tight ends are there. I think Lucas Krull has the potential to be good. I really do. If he could stay healthy for a full season, I think he has the potential to be good. I think Daniel Marega can do some things out there. I think Gavin Bartholomew, who's gotten a lot of praise as a freshman. We'll see. I don't know if a freshman tight end is all that likely to break into the rotation to make an impact, but maybe this is the year when somebody does it. These guys, I feel like the players are there. What it's always going to come down to is the offensive line and whether they can hold up and open holes for the running backs and give those guys an opportunity to get out and make plays and get to the second level and make a guy miss and turn a 5-yard gain into a 15-yard gain, the old sayings. And then if they can hold up and give Kenny Pickett time to find the receivers, give him time to make good throws, make good reads and good throws. And, there is some truth in the fact that Kenny Pickett needs to throw better passes. We talk about drop passes all the time, and a lot of that's on the receivers, a lot of that's on the tight ends, but he could do a better job putting the ball on them with a little bit better touch, leading them a little bit better, putting the ball where they can make plays with it. There are a lot of factors that go into it, but I think Pitt has the horses. I don't think this is a matter of not having good enough personnel at the skill positions. We'll find out about the offensive line, but I think they've got the personnel at the skill positions to make an impact, to be explosive, to have firepower, as the question said. But they need to be able to block. Quarterback needs to play well. Gerard Mariak says, y'all should be watching the game, LOL. Well, yeah, man. I mean, you should have the college basketball game on. Turn it on, hit mute on the sound, and then watch the podcast, right? Turn up the live stream on your phone or your tablet or your computer or whatever it is. Let's see. Brock Madonic really getting a lot of questions in here. Have you heard anything from people around Pitt about the John Hughley situation? Do you see him coming back? I don't know what's going to happen with Hughley. I think he could be a big part of the rotation. Remember, that's one of my 3 big questions this offseason. 3 big questions. 1, can they get a transfer center, somebody who can come in and play right away? 2, will Justin Champagnie come back or go to the NBA? 3, will Pitt have John Hughley back this season? This coming season. I think that's a huge piece of it. I think if you get Hughley to go with the transfer center, then you've got, the front court not locked up, but I mean, you've got the front court in much better shape than it was a year ago. I don't know if Hughley's going to be back, though. I hear, ebbs and flows in terms of confidence about him returning. And, probably right now it's waning a little bit. And it's tricky to I don't know. I think there are parts of the process that have to play out, and I don't know how that's going to go. I mean, I'll just be completely honest with you. I don't know enough details about his situation. I don't know enough details about what's going to happen with the legal process for John Hughley. And that's probably going to have a lot to do with whether or not he returns to Pitt. Michael B. says, why does Pitt have so much trouble finding a decent big guy? I don't know, because it's hard to find. And I've often said that Pitt's issues, Pitt's struggles, the downfall of the program, I think, in my view, and I've gotten disagreement about this, and it's fine, you can disagree, but I think the downfall of the program really can be traced back to, back-to-back years of getting really nothing, a season and a half out of Ken Burch and Steven Adams. I think if you have those guys for any extended period of time, your success during those years increases significantly, and you end up parlaying that into more success, better recruiting, which extends the success and all of that. But those guys, Ken Burch, half a season, Steven Adams, 1 year of really developmental play, not making a huge impact offensively. Losing those guys prematurely, I think, set the program back, and I don't think Pitt ever recovered from it. I think Jamie Dixon tried to fill in with JUCOs and, like Casson Diggs and, guys like that. And there was solid play at times, Talib Zanna and, I guess, Gary McGee or something. I mean, but you needed Ken Burch and or Steven Adams to be really good. And then you never got that production out of them. You know what I mean? You never got the quality time from Burch and Adams. And I don't think the program ever recovered. I think you could, if you want to draw a line backward of where, how did they get to here, or where was the point where the wave crashed, I think that's where the wave starts to crash there. That's always been my opinion. And so you're looking at, a 10-year period of struggling to recruit that position. And I don't think it's easy to do. I think it's tough to find good centers. I think it's tough to find those guys and get them to go to a school like Pitt, particularly once Pitt's level of success dropped off and Pitt's relevance on the national college basketball scene waned. I think it became more difficult to find those talented, quality, productive centers and get them here. I think it became tougher. And, we've seen that struggle year after year. And I think that's why John Hughley was potentially so important, because he looked pretty good, and he looked like he could be pretty good. And he looked like he could develop over the next couple of years to be really good. And getting him back would be pretty huge. Michael B says, I didn't answer his second question. Oh, he asked about Jared West. Jared West, guard transfer from Marshall, is committing or announcing his school, announcing his transfer choice on Wednesday. So, depending on when you listen to this podcast, his decision, his decision could already be made. You may already know where Jared West is going to go by the time you listen to this podcast. And so I apologize for that if you, have that information. It looks like Jared West is down to Louisville, Ohio State, and Pitt. Felt pretty good about Pitt's chances with him for a while now. Like I say, he's a grad transfer guard from Marshall. He has 1 year to play. He was really good at Marshall, really good defender, pretty productive offensive player, average double-digit scoring, and I think could be could play on the ball or off the ball. Could be a point guard or a shooting guard. He's a good combo guard, sort of, kind of role. And like I say, he's down to Pitt, Louisville, and Ohio State. Early on, when he first went into the portal, it seemed like Pitt was in really good shape. There's been some late kind of push or rumors about Louisville. I don't know. I'm still leaning toward Pitt, but we'll find out on Wednesday. If he comes, that fills out your guard rotation pretty nicely. Because right now you're set. You've got Femi Odikale, you've got Nike Sabandi, you've got Ithia Horton. You add in Jared West, and now you've got 4 veteran guards. I mean, counting Femi Odikale as a veteran, coming into his sophomore season. But if you got 4 guards with college experience, you add 1 freshman, which they're trying on a couple different guys. Jalen Blakes is the guard that they offered a couple weeks ago. You would have 4 college experience guards in Odekale, Sabandi, Horton, and West, and then you add in a high school kid to go with it, I mean, I think you've filled out your backcourt nicely, and you can really focus on the wings and the front court. I mean, that would be a great situation, I think, for Pitt to be in. Now, if they miss on West, if they don't get Jared West, there are a million guards in the portal. I think they can find another guy who can sort of fill that role. It would be nice to find a guy who could shoot really well. West is just okay, but he's a great defender, and I think that helps you a lot as well. You know, getting a really good on-ball defending guard could, I think, be really, could be hugely beneficial. So we'll find out about West, like I say, on Wednesday, and certainly we'll talk about that, you know, later in the week on Panther-Lair.com after he makes his decision. But I think Pitt's got a pretty good shot. We'll find out, though. This late sort of push from Louisville is a little concerning. Brock Madonic says, what freshman for the football team do you see making a pivotal impact right away? You know, I don't know. I don't know. So it's tough. You know, I mean, obviously Jordan Addison made to use your words, Brock, a pivotal impact right away last season. Is there a Jordan Addison in this year's recruiting class? If there is, I think it's probably Khalil Anderson. And it's too bad that Khalil Anderson, the cornerback out of Georgia, out of the Atlanta area, it's too bad he wasn't able to enroll at Pitt in January and get involved in spring camp and take part, you know, in these 15 practices this spring, and, you know, get all that extra practice time and be ready for the season. Jordan Addison got that extra, well, he enrolled early, but he only got 3 extra spring practices because obviously those were canceled last year. After 3 practices, spring camp was put on ice. You know, so he wasn't all that far ahead of the game, although he was in Pittsburgh. He was with the team. He was with his teammates. He could go play catch with Kenny Pickett or what have you. But I think Khalil Anderson is probably the closest. He's got a good chance of being that guy. Now, the one thing is that Anderson's walking into a room, like we talked about, that has some veteran corners with experience. It's got Marquez Williams. It's got Damari Mathis. It's got A.J. Woods. And then it's got Rashad Battle, who played quite a bit last season as a freshman. It's interesting. If you look at Battle's snaps last year as a freshman, he played more snaps last year than Marquez Williams had in his entire career coming into last season. So, and Williams, you know, steps into a starting role after Damari Mathis got hurt. But Battle's coming into this season with more experience than Williams had prior to last year. But my point is this. There's some players with experience in that room. If you go Williams, Mathis, Woods, Battle. The only thing is, Anderson might be better than any of them. I mean, he's really, really talented, and I think he could be really good when he gets into college. And I think he's going to have a chance to play as a freshman. I would almost guarantee he's going to play as a freshman. He's going to be on special teams. I think he's going to get a bunch of snaps on in the defense, rotating in at corner. And if he's good enough, he might work his way up and into the 2 deep and maybe even into a starting job. I wouldn't rule that out. Because I think he is that talented. So I think he's got a real chance at playing as a freshman. I think he would definitely play as a freshman. I think he's got a chance to make a big impact. So I would probably put him at the top of the list for now, but we'll see how things play out over the next 6 months or so. Scott Eisenberg says, the last receiver you were bullish on was Michael Smith, Chris, so don't jinx Jalen Barton. Hey, man, I was bullish on Jordan Addison last year. I was bullish on him as a recruit. It was like 2 falls ago. I kept talking about Jordan Addison, how good he was in college, or how good he was in high school, how good he was going to be in college, and keep an eye on him. He's going to be a big contributor as a freshman and all that stuff. I've been bullish on a lot of guys since Michael Smith. I got that one wrong. You know, I don't I don't hide from it. I've missed on a few guys over the years. I think everybody has. I think the Pitt coaches thought Michael Smith was going to be really good. And you watch his high school tape and you're like, wow, this guy looks incredible. Well, didn't quite translate to college, but he wasn't the last receiver I was bullish on. I like Jalen Barton a lot. I like Jordan Addison a lot. And I think those guys are going to show it this season. Let's see here. Scrolling down through the questions. Royce Beacom chiming in. Nice to see you, Royce. Glad you can make it to the live stream tonight. Why would Kareem Koulibaly leave why would he leave before Pitt even finds a center? Finding a center would have allowed Koulibaly to move to strong forward unless the issue was between him and Capel. I think, it seems like Koulibaly wanted to play forward. Koulibaly wanted to play power forward and not center, and his position at Pitt was at center. If they brought in a transfer center and got John Hughley back and landed Efton Reed, then maybe they would have the depth that they could move Koulibaly to power forward. But I don't know when you look at how Pitt has played under Jeff Capel, Justin Champagnie's been the power forward the last 2 seasons. Who was the power forward in Capel's first year? I don't even remember. Shamil Stevenson? Audis Toney, did he play the 4 in Capel's first season? I would have to go back and look. But they haven't really used a power forward like what Koulibaly would be. At least of what my imagination of his skill set is and how he would function and playing the 4. I don't think they've used the power forward like him. They've had a guy like Champagnie out there. And you're not always going to find a guy like Justin Champagnie, but I think that's the kind of guy that Jeff Capel would want to have or maybe prefer to have. I don't know. So I'm not sure if he was going to get a chance at playing power forward for Pitt, unless they went with a big lineup where they had 2 centers on the court. So let's see. Is the emphasis on the big guy, or is it Pitt and Jeff Capel focused on 6'6", 6'8" swing guys predominantly? At least for the center position, Royce, I think Jeff Capel wants a big center. He wants a sort of a classic center, a big guy under the basket who can finish around the rim, get rebounds, be a deterrent in the lane, and block shots and do all those things. I don't think he necessarily, wants a center who's going to step out and shoot 3-pointers. I don't think he's looking for that kind of player. I think he does want a lot of 6'6", 6'8" swing guys and wings. But he also, I think he wants a couple big centers who can play down there. Power centers who can play sort of that classic center role. And he just hasn't been able to really find them. And I think, like I said, it's been tough for Pitt to find them for quite a while. Probably because there aren't as many of those guys out there, and they tend to go to college and play for a year and go to the NBA. I think when you look at this basketball roster overall, I was just talking about the guards a minute ago when we were talking about Jared West and him possibly transferring to Pitt. You bring back Femi Odikale, you got Nike Sabandi, you got Ithiel Horton. If you bring in a transfer like a Jared West or another guard out there, because there are a lot of them in the transfer portal, and then you bring in a high school guy, I think you've got all the depth you need in the backcourt. I think you're locked up. You've got it set. And then you get to the wings, and you got Will Jeffress coming back, I should say. Noah Collier potentially could play a 4. I don't know if he'd be a big 3. Maybe you slide him out there. I'm not sure. And then obviously Champagnie being kind of in the mix there as well. Champagnie being an option to play 3 or 4. Assuming he comes back. But you've got this. You've got something pretty close to a solid foundation, I think. I think you've got something pretty close to a competent and effective ACC roster. And what you really just need to fill out is that center position, and then your depth. You know what I mean? You can't just have Will Jeffress as your only 3. Now, I think if you get all those guards like I was talking about, then you've got real possibility of rolling out with Odikale, Horton, and Sabandi. You know what I mean? I don't know if you necessarily would want to do that, but the possibility would be there. I think Will Jeffress is a guy that you definitely look at, as potentially taking a big step forward next season. I think he's one that could be a big part of this team, particularly if Justin Champagnie doesn't come back. You're going to need another source of offense, and I think Will Jeffress absolutely could provide it. Going into next season, I think he could take a big step forward as a sophomore, and if he does that, you're going to be, I think that's a big boost to what they try to do, and it could give them a really different look. especially if Champagnie does come back. And then you've got Odekale Sabandi with Jefferson Champagnie. I mean, would you take that? Assuming Will Jeffers has, make some progress between his freshman and sophomore year. And I think by the end of the season, he was showing some signs of gaining confidence and gaining, just strength and getting more comfortable on the court. I think it took him a little while to get comfortable out there. But I think he was showing some signs of it by the end of the season. And so if you had, would you take that? Odekale Sabandi, Jeffers Champagnie as your 1 through 4? I would absolutely take it, and I think they would win a lot of games if they get competent play out of the 5. And so that becomes the most important thing that can happen here. And it's been the most important thing that can happen here. They're very close, I think, to having that kind of roster that could really have success. It's just, you got to get a couple more pieces. And that's the roster construction angle that Jeff Capel has constructed parts of a roster. But for whatever reason, he's still got a couple pieces that need to be filled in. And, we'll see what he's able to do this offseason to sort of fill those pieces in. Let's see here. Michael B says, do you think Champagnie is also waiting to see which players Pitt lands as a factor in his decision? I mean, if Reed came here, that would probably incentivize Justin Champagnie to come back more, right? It's a better team. Yes and no. I don't know. I mean, I think I think Champagnie is going to make his decision based on what his NBA draft prospects look like. I don't think he's going to look at it and say, well, this Pitt team could actually be in the top 5 in the ACC, or I don't know if this Pitt team could be this or that. I don't think that's going to be one of his deciding factors. If they tell him, look, you are a guaranteed first-round draft pick, and he says, well, I can either go be a first-round draft pick or I can come back and play with Efton Reed at Pitt, I think he's going to go to the NBA. And that only makes sense. So I don't think he's looking at that. I think it's really about where his draft prospects fall. Matt Durney says, if you would have told me 5 years ago after Jamie Dixon left that we would be content as Pitt fans to field a competent ACC roster, I would say you were nuts, but that is where we are. I don't think anybody's content to field a competent ACC roster, but Matt, this whole thing is trying to build back from a winless season in the ACC, where they were very much far from being competent, right? Everything since then, everything since that season, that year was patient zero. That was where everything started. Or it all got reset back to that moment. Patient zero is not the right word. Citizen zero, that was the start over point for Pitt basketball. And when you're building back up, at some point you're going to have to, one of the levels you're going to reach is competency, which they've only been able to have in sort of fleeting moments over the last 3 years. And they've had those fleeting moments of competency, but they haven't been able to string it together and be a consistently competent roster. And that is not, I don't think Pitt fans are content to be competent. I don't think Pitt fans would be or should be content to be competent, but that is the next level to achieve. And once you get to be competent, then you can move forward to be even more competitive and successful and ultimately, at the top of the league. But you kind of got to move step by step, stage by stage. And, if you put out a roster like the one I was just talking about, Odekale, Sabandi, Jeffers, Champagnie, and a good center, you're going to be competent, you're going to be competitive, and should be able to do it consistently over the course of a season. That would be a big step forward. And it comes down to the personnel. It starts and ends with the personnel. You have to get good players in there to take those steps. Let's see here. Tyler Buchanan says, I've been watching the Efton Reed situation close for a while. Where is it saying Crystal Ball Pitt? Because I just checked and don't see this anywhere. Yeah, I think it's on Rivals. The Future Cast, I think is what it's called. And Rivals analyst Jamie Shaw put in a future cast for Efton Reed to Pitt. That was sort of new that came out today. And, like I say, I mean, it's a tricky situation. He's a really talented center with, the possibility of going to college and playing somewhere in college, or, going to, going to the G League and preparing for his NBA career. And that's probably the first decision that a guy like Efton Reed has to make. Does he want to go to college at all? And then if he does want to go to college, where does he want to go? I think, if he decides to go to college, Pitt's got a very good chance of landing him. I don't know if he's going to decide to go to college, though. I don't know. Ryan Berry says, how big of an impact would Jared West make? I'm hearing he's very good defensively. Yeah, he was, an a defensive player of the year in Conference USA for Marshall. I think a couple times he was all defensive team in Conference USA for Marshall, and I think that's one of his strengths. He regularly led the conference in steals, and I think he's also a pretty solid offensive player as well. It's just it's just a matter of where he's going to go. And I think he's been a point guard primarily at Marshall, but he's willing to come in and play off the ball and play with Femi. And that's what the Pitt coaches have tried to sell him on, is the possibility of playing, the two guard and, sharing the court with Femi Odikale. And he says he'd be fine with that. He thinks they would complement each other well with the way the Pitt coaches laid it out for him. He thinks they could be good complementary pieces on the court at the same time. So we'll see if he decides to do that. Like I say, that decision's going to come on Wednesday. Pitt, Louisville, or Ohio State. Still think Pitt's got a really good shot, but there's a lot of noise, a lot of chatter about Louisville being prominent here for Jared West. So we'll see what he decides to do on Wednesday. All right, I didn't really get into the football roster construction stuff, but we talked about some football guys in there as well. Of course, we've got lots of time to talk about Pitt football and Pitt football roster construction over the next, 6 months? Less than 6 months. 6 months from now, we'll be a month into the football season. Woo! It's coming up fast. 5 months. We got 5 months to talk about roster construction in the football program, and we'll certainly spend a lot of time doing that. By next Tuesday night, we'll talk about Jared West's decision, whether he decides to go to Pitt or go elsewhere, and any other developing news on the basketball front. And then, of course, we'll spend even more time talking about Pitt football as they move through spring camp. We'll see what developments there are at that point. Pitt, of course, went on a pause, so they had to miss 3 practices last week. Pat Narduzzi said they'll make them up. He's not entirely sure when or how, but he's going to, they're still planning to have the spring game on April 17th at Heinz Field. Still planning to have fans involved or in attendance if you are so inclined, wearing a mask and all that stuff. But, that's good news, right? You get an opportunity to see a little bit of spring football in person. So hopefully hopefully those plans stay in place. Hopefully Pitt doesn't have any more pauses on its spring football practices, and hopefully we can, everybody can get together at Heinz Field and watch a little spring camp and have a little bit of a feeling of normalcy. Make sure you go check out Home Field if you're going to go to the spring game. Right, you want to look good, you want to feel good. Home Field Apparel has got these great Pitt shirts, Pitt sweatshirts. You can get this design. They got a shirt just says 13-9. You know it, right? You know what that is. And that's the cool thing about Home Field that I really like. They make a high quality product, right? The shirt is super soft. It keeps its shape and form. It feels great. Their sweatshirts are the same way. But their logos and designs are inspired by the fan base, inspired by the history of the school. And there are things like that, like a shirt that just says 13-9, and it's instantly recognizable for fans of the school. They know what it is, and it means something to them. And that's kind of what's cool about Home Field is they've got those kinds of products and those kinds of designs on a high-quality shirt. So go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. They support the podcast. They support the website. So you should go support them and check them out. They've got a lot of good things there. And, of course, our website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, you can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. If you want to talk about Pitt sports, stay up to date on the latest Pitt sports news, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Saturday morning, 8 a.m., the Panthers Insider Show on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. Make sure you check that out for another hour of all Pitt sports talk. And then right here, every Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m., youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Remember, subscribe to us on YouTube so you always know what's going on with our live stream and when we're going live. A couple questions coming in late. Blackman614, Ben Mulcaney, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. You guys are asking questions about Pitt's running game. I talked about that earlier in the show, so you're going to have to go back and listen because we're almost out of time here. And Ben, you asked about Nate Santos that Pitt offered yesterday, 6'7" wing. Talked about him as well. Think Pitt's got a great chance there, so you have to go check that out. But right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you always know when we're going live and everything we're talking about. And, and tune in. 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday night right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can check us out, join the conversation, talk a little Pitt sports. Thanks to everybody who jumped in on the podcast tonight. It's been fun talking with you guys. And thanks to everybody who listened to the podcast throughout the week. We appreciate that. And we'll talk to you next Tuesday night. So have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Tuesday.